Okay, so we're on Dustloop, which is a site for Guilty Gear related things, right? Guilty Gear frame data, strategy, character art, literally tons of things. But the thing that we're here for today is one of the most important things that I think a lot of fighting game players don't think about, right? They only really think about the numbers, especially like newer fighting game players. Someone tells you, hey, learn the frame data. I totally put a webcam frame on it. I need to. Learn the frame data. The frame data is really, really important. If you don't know frame data, then you can't play the game, right? They don't say anything about learning move feel. And what I want to talk about today is what makes moves feel a certain way and what makes characters feel a certain way. My webcam frame is actually off, so I'm just going to turn it off. My webcam frame is like not in the right position. That looked really stupid. You guys saw that with me. So here's like pros and cons of the character, right? But we're not looking for any of that. What we need to look at is the hitboxes of these moves. Now, there's multiple things to hitboxes. I'm going to zoom in to me real quick. So there's 3 things to a hitbox in most games. There is A, the hitbox, which is the most important, I guess, right? It's the thing that does the damage. And I'll further explain that on the screen here in a second. There is the hurt box, which is, as it says, I punch you in the fucking chest. Your chest was the hurt box, bitch. And then there's the push box. Say I'm giving you a hug and I weigh a lot and I'm leaning up against you. I'm pushing you. My body, in real life, is somewhat of a push box. So push boxes and hurt boxes are usually pretty close to each other. In fighting games, what a push box does is it makes it so, say you knock an opponent down on wake up. You knock an opponent down and you want to dash at them on wake up. If you've ever watched a match of Street Fighter or a match of Dragon Ball is a perfect example. How you can dash your opponent further into a corner, or you can dash them mid-screen if you need the positioning after you knock them onto the ground. What that is your push box moving their character's hurt box and push box along the ground before they can wake up with an action or wake up super, because that's what most of us scrubs are going to do, right? So let's go over to this. This shows the images for the moves, which I guess is kind of accurate. But what's even more accurate is looking at these hitboxes. So now let's make this bigger. You see that very small yellow thing? I promise you, that is not the hitbox. Nago's not that broken. Okay, hear me out. Before you guys start screaming at me saying Nago's broken, top 3 character, that's his push box. If you ever walk up to someone with that will move the other character. You see the big green thing, the big green box, like tealish, bluish, whatever you want to call it. That's the hurt box. That's all of Nagoriyuki that can be hurt. Yeah, his hair apparently can't be hurt. You can't pull that man's hair and hurt him. The top of his demon mask cannot be hurt. His arm here in the back holding the sword, unfortunately, cannot be hurt. And this leg part can't be hurt. But the red, that is what can do damage to the opponent, what can collide with the opponent's push and hitbox. Push and hurt box, apologies. So this move, very fast, but very small, right? We can look at other examples. Moves that, and I'm going to this character specifically because I know that he has disjointed moves. 5K is not disjointed in any way, but as you can see, the hurt box on this is way closer to the hitbox. So this move is like more accurately coinciding with the way a kick would work, right? So if you look at it, almost all of the leg is a hurt box and a hitbox. Almost all of it equally matches up, okay? Doesn't work that way with a lot of moves, unfortunately, like if you look at the 5P. Now, let's go to a move that I know has a disjoint that really seems to piss people the fuck off. Let's go to it. 2S. 2S, 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 2S. Actually, 2S is not disjointed. Holy shit. 2S is not disjointed. Wow, people told me this move's disjointed and I should spam it because it's not broken. Because it's broken. It's not. See, and if you just went by game feel and said, you know what, this move is a sword. It's got to be able to do damage but not get hit. You would get smacked because if you see that teal part of the box towards the end of it is actually able to be hit. You can actually outspace this move and hit it if you have a perfectly spaced, disjointed, like fully disjointed move. I'll show you guys one here in a second that I know is disjointed for sure you can't fucking confuse it with something that isn't disjointed. If you can outspace this move, you can actually hit the green box before the red box hits you. Pretty cool, right? Now let's go to a fully disjointed move. We'll stay on this character. We really could go over to a character like Ramlethal in Guilty Gear Strive to perfectly show this shit off. But instead, we're just gonna show these 3 versions of 6H, right? We could also go to 5H, if I'm not mistaken. 5H is also disjointed, and there's 3 different hits, 3 different links, depending on what blood level you have. Let's just go here, right? This is level 3, 5H. This is blood level 3, 5H. All of the red comes out, and there is no green and no yellow. So if you perfectly space a move like this, your 5H, which I believe is a mid, you should be able to hit Nagoriyuki's 2S because it's not a disjointed move, right? Something like a low poke punch or a low poke kick, like a 2K, a 2D with most characters that are not Geo. Hello, Geo. What a great character. Would get absolutely smoked by this crazy high priority, right? That's what a lot of less knowledgeable fighting game characters would say. They'd be like, oh, that move just has really high priority. Normally what people think of when they think of high priority is they think of a move that like either beats another move because it's disjointed or beats another move because it's really fast, right? That's just what people usually think. But a lot of times it's actually just the move's hit and hurt boxes being better than another move that is on the screen. Okay? So yeah, frame data is very important, but I also think that if your game has this resource, you should look into it. It's a little more finicky and wonky with 3D games, right? Because we have like things like counter hit retracking. Your hit and hurt boxes are in a 3D space, not a 2D space. This is a line, okay? This on the screen is a line. This is very easy for you to kind of understand what's happening, right? You could like put an invisible little box on the screen in front of you. Just imagine a little box. And we see this finger out, right? And we see this guy standing. And this finger is a hit and hurt box. Perfectly accurate, right? And boom, it's gonna deal damage. Now, we can also say that if these guys decided to like stick out their finger or their kick, punch, and they like went into each other, look at that. If these moves are the exact same speed, depending on the game, you're gonna clash, or you're going to trade, or in Mortal Kombat 9 sense, you're gonna get player 1 advantage, and if you're player 1, you win the trade because there's no trades in Mortal Kombat 9, which is fucked up. Now, get my handy dandy tool that I like to use to cut artwork. Whenever I do artwork for my arcade sticks, it's been a while. I only have 1 stick that does artwork right now. I used to have like 2 or 3. This is a scalpel. This is a blade. This blade, more than likely, cannot be hit, right? Like you could knock back the blade or whatever. You can trade with it, maybe if you have another blade. But if you try to poke this blade with your finger, that's gonna cause you to get hurt, but not the blade to get hurt. This is a perfect example of a disjoint IRL. If you got a gun, you have one of the fastest and strongest disjoints IRL in real life, okay? Flamethrowers are another good example. And I say that because a flamethrower is kind of a gun, right? But with a gun, the difference is it's very instant. It's on the blink of an eye. If you've ever shot a gun before, and maybe a lot of you haven't, I own a gun. 380 ammo in the room. Or, pardon me, I don't. My wife owns a gun. 380 ammo in the room. Okay. So if that gun is shot, that bullet has some travel time. It's almost like a hit scan weapon in a video game. It's very fast, doesn't feel very projectile in close range, and it's just instant. And then the hitbox is over with. The hitbox of the bullet is over. A flamethrower, I'll relate it to a character here in a second in a fighting game, don't you worry, has very long active frames, but still has a pretty decent disjointed range. Because that flame counts as an active hurt box while not being an active hitbox without being a hurt box, and has extremely stupid active frames. A great example of that is Street Fighter. Characters like Dhalsim with fire-based moves, if you haven't noticed, they have a lot of active frames on these moves. You can use them to meaty people very well. And the reason for that is because it was meant to mimic real-life fire. If fire is out, it is always dealing damage on something or on an area as long as it exists and is not being extinguished. The perfect example of active frames and disjoints that is extremely powerful, extremely broken. If this should happen to IRL, we'd all be losing limbs and shit. Lightsabers. As long as a lightsaber exists, it can do damage way better than me just sticking my arm out, right? So I could say I stick my arm out. I'm going to move my mic closer to me so it doesn't cut out. If I just stick my arm out, this is more of a hurt box than it is a hit box. This isn't doing anything anymore. The active frames was me doing this. Okay. IRL. This is the active frame. Now I just have an arm here that someone can just like twist. And I'm like, ah! A lightsaber, I could just hold that lightsaber out. And if you decide you want to try to move it out of the way with your hand, you just lose your hand. Okay. So thinking of all those things, that kind of helps with the idea of game feel. With that idea of game feel, now you can take a look at this move on the screen in front of you, and you can say, damn, that move's got a lot of disjointed properties. That's fucked up, but it's a sword, so it makes sense, right? In 2D fighter, swords aren't always disjoints because it'd be really unfair if like every sword move in the game was a disjoint. I guess I've gotten used to it. I do find it very annoying, but it's fine. Like 5D, look at that, you can trade with 5D. And things like summons, right? So let me go over to a character like Eddie. Like Eddie? Eddie's not the character. Eddie is the summon. Let me go over to a character like Zato. Let me see if I can find Zato. Zato. Now, before you like start crying that, hey, my character has a sword, which is something I used to do a lot. My character has a sword. Why isn't the sword always disjointed? This doesn't make sense, right? You do have to keep like the game in mind and the way the game is balanced in mind for hitboxes and hurtboxes, right? So look at his hand. His hand is out. His hand's not an active hurtbox. Only an active hitbox. Only a hurtbox. Only Eddie's little poke here is the real active frames on the move. Cool. Makes sense. Totally understandable. Now here, once again, only Eddie is doing the damage. Totally not disjointed. There's a bigger hitbox. There's a bigger hurtbox and there's a hitbox on close slash. Far slash, I believe far slash is also not disjointed. And for balancing reasons, there's a whole part of this move at the top, at the bottom, and in the very front that can just whiff. That just won't hit. If you are actively standing right there, you can make this move whiff and then punish. That is probably for balancing reasons. Now, let's take a look at one of his longer range moves that I think, if I'm not mistaken, is actually a disjoint. No, wow, that's crazy. These moves are not disjointed. This move has a really low, this is a good example, I guess, but this is a very game specific. This is called a high crushing move. Let's just go with the word high crushing move. So if you can see, the yellow box is actually bigger than the green box, is a teal box, whatever you want to call it. And the reason for that is because this move has what some players like to call head invul. It goes way above the head, okay? But the reason why this move is called head invul is because it's meant to beat air moves that don't hit all the way to the ground, and it's meant to beat highs. This is a 6P. Every character in the game kind of has a similar styled move to this, and I think they're all mechanically set on 6P, right? Let me see if I can find... Does he actually not have any disjointed moves? Wow. Wow, he actually doesn't have any disjointed moves. I would have assumed that like some of these Eddie moves would be disjointed. But I guess I'm just wrong. I guess Pierce is disjointed, so that's good. And the reason for that is I'm not sure actually why it's disjointed. But if you see, the only thing you can hit on this is Eddie. You can't actually hit Zato. Right? This move, the back half of it can be hit, but the front half has way more active hitboxes than hurtboxes. And the reason for that is because this move is supposed to be used as like an advancing tool that's hard for your opponent to challenge, even as the summon. Cool, right? Another good example is I could go over to oppose. And here's oppose. Oppose is actually all hurtbox. Oppose actually doesn't do anything unless you hit it, right? But you can't hit Zato. You can only hit Eddie, which is really cool. And look at all the differences in the attacks. After the guard point, it has all of the disjointed hitboxes so that you're not randomly double hit clashing or trading with oppose. Oppose is meant to beat someone who pressed a button. Cool. Makes sense. I'm just using specifically Guilty Gear Strive in this in this example, because Guilty Gear has a phenomenal resource called Dust Loop, where it shows all of these active hit and hurt boxes. I'm going to show a real travesty because it makes people really sad. But I think for balancing reasons, it makes sense. Okay, I definitely dislike the shit out of this character. But for balancing reasons, this totally makes sense, right? 60 damage, startup frames 15, active frames 9, minus 34 on block, and 44 recovery frames, which is pretty bad. A lot of people would say that this move, 6H, actually needs its hurt box reduced and just completely removed. Because if you look at it from like a practical sense and a gameplay sense, they're two different things. So I just showed off a scalpel. If I can find that scalpel again, that'd be lovely. This man is holding a giant scalpel. He's holding a giant scalpel. And on this scalpel, there's a part that has a blade that can deal damage. Well, I guess you could also whack him with the base, right? And there's a part that he's holding on to. So when you think about that, it really feels like part of this, maybe further forward, should be disjointed and not be a hurt box and only be a hitbox. Unfortunately, for balancing reasons, they thought this would be too powerful. So, even at the very front, you can outspace it and trade with him, clash with him, or beat him. And all of this up here that stops dealing damage at some point, because if we go to an earlier frame, of this, it does indeed deal damage. See, at the very start, middle, end. Okay, so you guys can see these three on the side, correct? This is how moves have their game feel. And if your game, whatever game you happen to play, has this resource, you should look into it. You should really get familiar with these hit and hurt boxes and push boxes, so you understand why you're traded in certain situations, why it feels like moves are beating yours when they don't look like they should. Maybe they're disjointed, and why it feels like a certain move doesn't work the way you want it to, or doesn't work the way it looks on the screen. Behind the scenes, there's a lot that goes on in fighting games for balancing reasons that we can't always just chalk up to this doesn't look right. A character like Axel can be traded with on his chain, right? If Axel couldn't be traded with on his chain, I've heard that he would be extremely stupid. So I'm going to go ahead and believe those people who actually play Guilty Gear and say, yeah, that's right, because he's meant to be a Dhalsim-style character, right? And Dhalsim, in your head, you think, okay, it makes sense that you can trade with Dhalsim because they're limbs, they're his arms. If Dhalsim throws out a big windy jump punch thingy and I smack the fuck out of his arm as it's coming out, it makes sense. If I smack the fuck out of a sickle on a chain, it doesn't make sense. But for balancing reasons, you have to allow Axel to get hit there, or this character would probably be way too stupid. You'd have to change a lot about him. You'd have to make his moves slower, add more recovery to them, whatever that may be. And maybe that would ruin the sense of immersion in the game. Maybe that would maybe that would help with the sense of immersion in the game, but maybe it would ruin the character's feel overall. If you have one of these resources for your game, look into it. Try to figure out what things make sense and don't make sense in your game for balanced reasons, and play around it, work around it, get better as a competitor, and get better as like a player in general, right? Resources like this are a big help, and I think that they're often forgotten about and not thought about in the stead of frame data, frame advantage on hit, block, whiff, etc. They're both very important resources, and this is something that shouldn't be left out if your game has the resource for you to find out how it works. Another YouTube video in the bags, knocked out. If you're watching this on the stream, thank you so much. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, also thank you so much. Hit the like button below me. Hit the subscribe button. We like to put out these YouTube videos as often as we can, as long as I'm not having a busy week, busy month. We like to put out these Talk 7 videos. We also like to put out gameplay. But with that being said, that's the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. Have a good one. This is Beanie Thuggish for the YouTubes, signing out and saying peace.